All right, if you can. All right. So we got about 25 minutes before we can start Ma'ariv. For those of you who might be unsure, the thinking of the timing of these evening services on Yom Tov, you're allowed to start a Yom Tov a little early. You're allowed to continue from day 1 to day 2 a little early in most cases, but it's when you are concluding day 2, when you are marking the end of a Yom Tov, that we need to be precise. We don't want to be saying Havdalah before it's time. So that's the goal here. So that's why we say Mincha, the afternoon service, when there's still a little bit of light out, and then we wait a little bit for Ma'ariv. So I am here for those watching on live stream and who feel like keeping it on. Glad to have you if you are here. Again, wave if not. I'm sorry. In all seriousness, I figured I would just teach a little bit like I've done at other times rather than just kind of letting the room go dark. So if that's all right. So I thought what I would do is take a look at some sayings, some legends, some ideas about the Shalosh Regalim. Now, the Shalosh Regalim refers to the 3 pilgrimage festivals, Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. We haven't had a pilgrimage festival in a little bit. We haven't had it since June, since Shavuot. So, and the idea why we call it a pilgrimage festival is that in the days of the temple, that the Jews living in Israel and perhaps in other places, if they could, would make a point of traveling to Jerusalem and, if possible, making a sacrificial offering at the temple. And so, so those 3 holidays are really meant to commemorate the change of seasons and the noting the particular times of year. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are not considered pilgrimage festivals, even though they are Yom Tov, because the purpose for them is a much different purpose. Also, I would imagine that traveling back and forth between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and then Sukkot, if you lived far away from Jerusalem, would be just not practical. As a lot of you probably might know, in many ways, Sukkot was really the main festival of the fall. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur were not necessarily thought of as high holidays. That was an idea that we came to later on. Sukkot was really the holiday, and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur were really kind of the appetizers before the main course. So if people went to Jerusalem at any point, it wasn't for Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, it was Sukkot. So just to define a little bit about the pilgrimage festivals. So, first of all, this is a comment from the Midrash known as Yalkut, and it quotes Numbers chapter 29, verse 35. On the 8th day, you shall have a solemn assembly. Now, this is a reference to Shmini Atzeret, so you might be saying the 8th day of what? Well, we're talking about technically the 8th day of Sukkot, or at least 8 days after the beginning of Sukkot. The Holy One said to Israel, rejoicing becomes you, appointed seasons become you, feastal days become you. So in other words, when we observe these days appropriately, we become, I guess, one with them. Now, I don't know if that's the accurate translation or accurate way of looking at it, but in other words, it's an encouragement to make this part of sort of our essence. And then a quote from Isaiah chapter 26, verse 15, where he says, "You have increased for the nation." And the comment is, "When you multiply feastal days for the nations of the world, they each drink and carouse, attend their theaters and circuses, and provoke you with their foul utterances and vile deeds. But Israel is not like that. When you increase feastal days for the Israelites, they each drink and rejoice, but then attend synagogues and houses of study and augment the number of their prayers." So this is a statement that says, other people, when they have holidays, yeah, they celebrate, but they take it a little too far, and they make it so that it's no longer a holy day. They make it so that it becomes more profane than holy. And so the idea of a holiday is that we are celebrating, but we are doing so maintaining the dignity that God expects of us. And what's neat about this is that this is something that has, I think, trickled down to holidays in the modern state of Israel. The example that I can think of is Memorial Day in Israel, Yom HaZikaron, is a day of solemnity. It's a day where where Israelis are truly moved to speak with sadness and with reverence for those who paid the ultimate price in defending the state. In America, Memorial Day, I think we have moments of that in our society, but I think for many people, Memorial Day is an opportunity for a 3-day weekend, a place where people have sales. I mean, it's not the same. And again, it's okay to observe and to note and to perhaps, and to have a certain amount of appreciation for a holiday, but it's also, there has to be a kind of a sincere element of it. So this is what this is. This is sort of the praise. I think to me the ultimate example is New Year, right? The secular New Year it's a party. It is simply a party. The Jewish New Year is obviously a day of contemplation. It is a day of celebration. It is a Yom Tov, a good day, but it is also a day for us to say, how can we make this year better? I don't feel that as a secular society, there's a real major push to say, how can our society be better in the coming year? But this is something that we find important in Judaism. Okay. A little bit more about what a holiday means. This is from it's from a couple different, this is a combination of a couple different sources. One is the Tanhuma, and also some from the Yalkut. In Sepphoris, a heathen posed a question to Rabbi Akiva. Now, Sepphoris, we're not talking about that place where you get really expensive makeup. That's Sephora. Sepphoris is a town, presumably in Palestine. Why do you go on observing the appointed seasons? A non-Jew asked Rabbi Akiva. Did not the Holy One say to you, from Isaiah chapter 1, verse 14, your new moons and your appointed seasons my soul hates? Rabbi Akiva replied, had the Holy One said, my new moons and my appointed seasons my soul hates, I might have agreed with you. But what God said was, your new moons and your appointed seasons, meaning the appointed seasons that Jeroboam, son of Nevat, instituted, of which Scripture says, from 1 Kings chapter 12, Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised of his own heart. I'll get back to what all that means in a moment. But, Rabbi Akiva goes on, the appointed seasons you refer to will never cease, nor will the new moons. Why not? Because they belong to the Holy One, as is said, these are the appointed seasons of Adonai. And that's from Leviticus chapter 23, verse 4. Okay. Who is Jeroboam? Or Jeroboam, as it's spelled in English. Jeroboam was one of Solomon's sons. And Jeroboam was the leader of the, it wasn't a civil war, but it was essentially a breakup of the unified kingdom of Israel between a northern kingdom and a smaller southern kingdom. A little bit of background on that. God had promised King David that the house of David would always rule over the kingdom of Israel. When Solomon allowed the idols of some of his wives to infiltrate the temple in Jerusalem, and idolatry is the big no-no of God in the Hebrew Bible. That's as bad as it gets, any kind of idolatry. God says, well, Solomon, and the descendants of Solomon have to be diminished in some way. We're not going to take it away from them completely. We're not going to take the kingship completely, but what we're going to do is we're going to split the kingdom into two. So Jeroboam, who was interested in idolatry and was interested in kind of changing a bunch of things in ways that were just not acceptable to the Torah at all, Jeroboam wound up being the ruler of the 10 northernmost tribes, 10 out of 12, so you can, as you know, it's most of them. The 10 northernmost tribes, that became the northern kingdom. The southern kingdom, which included Jerusalem, that became known as Judah or Judea. That was ruled by Jeroboam's brother, another one of Solomon's sons, Rehoboam. So you have Jeroboam and Rehoboam. I'm sure that didn't get confusing at all. But what did Jeroboam do? Right? He was going, so he went rogue, taking 10 out of the 12 tribes with him. And one of the things he does is he says, we're going to have a feast in the 8th month. Now, what's the 8th month according to the Bible? Well, the first month according to the Hebrew Bible is not the month we're in right now, Tishrei. According to the Torah, the first month is Nisan, the month where we have Passover in the spring. Tishrei is the 7th month. That's the way it's described in the Torah. So the 8th month, therefore, is the month that we call Cheshvan. Now, the one distinct thing about Cheshvan is that unlike Tishrei, where we're having a holiday almost every time, almost every day, Cheshvan, there are no holidays except, of course, for Shabbat. Cheshvan is not interrupted in any way with any holidays. So here's Jeroboam saying, you know what? Here's how different I'm going to make things. I'm going to create a holiday during Cheshvan. That's the opposite of what we have. So when Rabbi Akiva is questioned, wait a second, we have this quote from the prophet Isaiah that, God hates the people's festivals. And Rabbi Akiva says, yeah, the festivals that Isaiah said that God hates, those are the ones that the people made, that Yeroboam made. Those are the festivals that God didn't ordain. But the festivals God ordained, the pilgrimage festivals, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, those are God's festivals. No one can take those away from God, and those are the ones that will stand the test of time. So that's the way the Rabbi Akiva answered that. Okay. Probably have time for another couple of these. Okay. So something we read, we're going to read this out of the Torah on Shmini Atzeret. We also read it the last day of Pesach, the last day of Shavuot. This particular verse from Deuteronomy 16. It says, our masters taught, and by the way, this is from the Talmud Masechet Pesachim, the tractate of Pesachim. Our masters taught, a man is obligated to cause his wife, his children, and the members of his household to rejoice, as it is said in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 14, you shall rejoice in your feast, you, your son, and your daughter, etc. With what is one to cause them to rejoice? With wine. But Rabbi Yehuda said, men with what is suitable for them, and women with what is suitable for them. Men with what is suitable for them, with wine, and women with what? Rabbi Yosef taught in Babylonia with colored garments, in the land of Israel with shiny linen garments. I do not endorse this. Essentially, here are men making rules saying that, what is joy according to, what is a joyful time for men? It's to be able to go drinking with your buddies. And for women, it's nice clothes. So not only is that obviously making major assumptions in terms of gender roles, there's no reason why women can't enjoy alcohol responsibly, just as men, and there's no reason why men can't enjoy fine clothing, just as a woman might. So it's very patriarchal. But I mean, this is what happens when only men are in the room to make the rules. You're going to get rules that are going to benefit men eventually. Well, not just eventually, just in many cases. But behind the patriarchal assumptions that are being made here, there is a consideration. The fact that the rabbis ask, with what is one to cause them to rejoice, it means they are at least asking, what's going to make us happy, right? We know we need to rejoice. We know that these holidays need to be times of joy. Let's find ways to make sure we enjoy them. And that's, I think, that in and of itself, that isolated thought is a very important idea. To be able to say that we're going to find some way to make this day special. And I think that's especially important for those who perhaps aren't necessarily drawn to all matters of observance of a holiday, right? There are plenty of people where, in terms of observance, they'll come to synagogue maybe sometimes they won't, sometimes maybe they'll make a point of waving lulav and etrog at some point, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll maybe they'll have a sukkah in their home, maybe they won't, maybe they'll go to somebody else's sukkah at some point. I mean, there's just a lot of different permutations, a lot of different ways that one can, observe the holiday. And credit to the rabbis for asking, what can we do, what should we do in order to make the holiday vital and joyful for them? Because you're supposed to enjoy them. Okay. This is also from Pesachim, from the Talmud. We have been taught, that Rabbi Eliezer said, on a festival, a man is either to eat and drink or to sit and study. But Rabbi Yehoshua said, divide the day, half for eating and drinking, and half for spending in the house of study. Rabbi Yochanan noted, both deduce it, in other words, both come to their opinions by basing it on the same verses, right? Two particular verses that allowed Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Eliezer to come to their respective conclusions. One verse says, a solemn assembly to Adonai your God. This is from Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 8. While another says, you shall have a solemn assembly. That's Numbers chapter 29, verse 35. How so? Rabbi Eliezer took the two verses to mean either entirely to God or entirely to yourselves, while Rabbi Yehoshua took them to mean divide the day half to God and half to yourselves. So a couple things here. Both of them are looking at two verses from the Torah that might be understood in opposite ways. In other words, you have one verse that says, okay, we're having a solemn assembly to God, and the other one says, we have a solemn assembly for you. So who's the assembly for? And then they both come up with different interpretations. Rabbi Eliezer basically looks at that and says, all right, pick one, pick a lane. Either we're going to make it a study holiday, each holiday. Either you choose to make it a study holiday or an eating and drinking holiday. You shouldn't mix them up. You shouldn't blend them together, those elements together. But if you pick one or the other, you're okay. Rabbi Yehoshua looks at it and says, no. Blending together is fine. In fact, that's the way it ought to be. Do some eating and drinking, do some studying. Do a little bit of both. And in many ways, we observe things as Rabbi Yehoshua did. But the idea that we have, this goes back to the first the first teaching that I talked about. The idea that, other nations might very well celebrate holidays with just total revelry and none of the solemnity. And that we Jews can do a bit of both. So that's, in essence, what they are acknowledging here. That any holiday has to be a little bit of everything. Has to be the time of carefree joy, and it has to be a time in which we set aside at least some time for sincerity. And I would even say, believe it or not, I know this isn't a major festival, but even Purim, right? Purim, which is as silly as it gets, remember, there are several mitzvot, there are several commandments that you are supposed to keep on Purim. You're supposed to listen to the Megillah. You're supposed to give food to the poor. You're supposed to give gifts of food to other people. You're supposed to have a festive meal. You're supposed to do all those things. On Purim, as silly as we get, when we read the Megillah, we're supposed to read that Megillah, we're supposed to hear every word of it. That is an important principle of it. So even on the silliest and goofiest of days, we have at least some moments where we have to be at least a little grounded, where we have to at least remember our fellow human being, where we're supposed to at least take a little moment and learn of our people's past. So this is a notable statement about what Judaism means. We can do a couple of different things at the same time. We can be serious and we can celebrate at the same time. So I hope that as we go on in our holidays, that we will continue to have that good mix between seriousness and celebration. Because we still have another week of this. We still got another week. Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, Simchas Torah, the whole bit. We've only just begun. So that, I think my time is up, and so thank you for listening to all of that. And I'm going to do this again a week from today. We can do Mariv. Would you like me? Okay. So I'll daven Mariv. Page 281 in the Shabbat Siddur. V'hurachu michaper avon v'lo yashchid v'yarbal yashiva po v'lo ya'ir kol chamato Adonai Hoshia hamelech yaninu v'yom korenu. You may be seated, Baruch Adonai. El chavekayam tamidim lo chalenu leolam va'ed baruch atah Adonai hamari v'aravim avat olam b'tisho b'chakim. V'avad chaltas mimenu leolamim baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael El melech neman shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai echad. V'yahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha v'aderech u'shoch becha uv'kumecha u'kshartam leota yadecha v'hayu letotafo b'neinecha u'chtavtam amzo beitecha u'v'yisharecha v'ayam. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liod lachem le'Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem emevem v'unim kozol. U'malchuto b'ratzon gilu alehem Moshe v'nei Yisrael echanu shira b'simcha rabba v'yamru chulam yichamocha be'elim Adonai mikamocha nedar ba'kodesh norati le'odo sefele
Malchutecha uvanecha bokei hayam lifnei Moshe ze'elianu v'yamru Adonai imloch leolam va'ed v'ne'amar ki fad Adonai et Yaakov u'ge'alo mi'ad chazak mimenu baruch atah Adonai ka'al Yisrael. Hashivinu. Ushmor tzeitenu v'oenu l'chaim u'shalom me'atah ve'ad olam baruch atah Adonai shomer amo Yisrael la'ad. Baruch Adonai olam. Ki ha'malchut shelcha hi ul me'ad timloch bechavod, ki ein lanu melech ela ata baruch atah Adonai, hamelech b'kvodo tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed v'al kol ma'asav. We rise for the Amidah, recited individually, 286 through 291. Please include the paragraph for the conclusion of a Yom Tov on 287. Please also include the extra paragraph for Chol HaMoed Sukkot, and you can find that in the middle of page 289. We rise for Aleinu on page 297. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon ha'kol l'teit gedula liotzer bereshit shelo asanu k'goyei ha'aratzot velo samanu k'mishpechot ha'adama shelo sam chelkeinu kahem v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamalachim hakadosh baruch hu. Kakatu b'toratah Adonai loch le'olam va'ed v'nemar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yihiyeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. We turn to page 80, the Psalm for the season of repentance. L'David Adonai orivi shemi mi'ira Adonai me'os chayim mimi echad v'korban. Lulehem anti the robetu Adonai beretz chaim kave el Adonai chazak b'yemet libecha vekave el Adonai. In our time of need to reflect on and hope for a better world, the proper setting to recite the words Yikadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah is not available to us, but the words still call V'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon of yomeichon, that God's rule soon be accepted during our lives. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. Praised and celebrated, lauded and worshipped, may you bring peace to the universe. To all of us, let us say Amen. So we say Shavua Tov and Moadim L'Simcha. I'm going to make Havdalah in the Sukkah. Those watching on live stream are just going to have to take my word for it. But if you are making Havdalah in the Sukkah, all you need to do is say the blessings over the wine or grape juice, the closing blessing, Hamavdil ben Kodesh L'chol, etc., and then to say the blessing for dwelling in the sukkah. So many thanks, and once again, Moadim L'Simcha, morning minyan, 7:15 a.m. tomorrow.